Good morning. Today I'd like to talk about Meister Eckart. Now, I think I've done him before, but as you go along, you get different insights and different views. I'm listening to a book on tape right now, on disc, about Meister Eckart, and it's really fascinating stuff to listen to him in depth. But just as the basics, he's a Dominican theologian and mystic. He lived from 1260 to 1329. He was considered one of the great Rhineland mystics, flourished in the early 14th century. And he was both a preacher and a scholar, so he taught in universities as well as being a very famous preacher. He's born in Hochheim in the German province of Thuringia in 1260. He joined the Dominican when he was just in his teens. He studied at Cologne and he taught at the University of Paris. He also held a position by Thomas. It is the same position that Thomas Aquinas had held. But throughout his career, he spent a variety of positions and responsibilities in the Dominican order. So he was both a scholar, a mystic. In other words, he had prayer that went very, very deep, as well as an administrator. So he had the gamut of different things, and he was, during his lifetime, called Master. So that's when you hear it in English called Meister Eckart, because he was just considered a master in all these different realms. In his thought process that he really brought forward, he really did a lot of work on talking about the inner soul. And we don't use the word soul as much anymore, but it's this concept of inside of us. There's some place down deep inside, and from there we can experience God. He would not only talk about the soul, but he talked about the ground of the soul, like that part at the bottom where we're on solid ground. And he called that ground God, that God is in this ground and we are in this ground. And at some point, we are very much together there. He was, at the end of his life, contested by a local bishop, and he listed a bunch of articles. But part of the problem is when you get into this mysticism thing, you start describing things with words that aren't the words you're using. They're kind of like at this deeper level. So as he talked about the soul, he talked about caring for that inner part of us. And he thought that that's important. He thought that people ought not to consider so much what they do as who they are. So he didn't say, we make ourselves good by doing good works. Not at all. He said, if we are good at our core, just all this other good things will come forth from us, and we'll be doing all those things. But he refers to the comment made by St. Paul, where he says, if a person were in a rapturous state, St. Paul once entered, and he knew of a sick man who wanted a cup of soup, it'd be far better to withdraw from the rapture for love's sake and serve him who is in need. So it's not separating ourselves from the good deeds doing. It's just knowing what causes those good deeds to be done is the sense of God's presence within us. The part of the way of getting to this inner self is kind of a detaching from the self. He says, and this sounds a lot like something Jesus would be saying, let everyone begin by denying self, and in so doing, he will have denied all else. Indeed, if a man give up a kingdom, or even the whole world, and still was selfish, he would have given up nothing. It's like we don't have to give up this or that or the other thing. We have to give up on ourselves. The other thing we need to let go of is this false image of God. The shell, and this is another quote from him, the shell must be cracked apart if what is in it is to come out. For if you want the kernel, you must break the shell. And therefore, in this shell may well be our false image, not only of ourselves, which we have, but also the false image we have of our God. If you want to discover nature's nakedness, you must destroy its symbols. And the farther you get in the nearer you come to its essence. When you come to the one that gathers all things up into itself, there you must stay. A lot of people saw his type of thinking as similar to Zen, where you let go and just go into this otherness where you have a sense of finding God. And now that's not an easy thing to do, and there's not good words to get to it. But Meister Eckart worked very hard at bringing this forward, this idea that we can connect with God. He has one thing where he's talking about the birth of Jesus. He says this in 3 different ways. He said, eternally, God, the birth happened right at the beginning of creation and kind of goes throughout all eternity. In another sense, it happened in history, in the moment, in the womb of the Virgin Mary. But in a third sense, as we experience Christ, it's like our God is born within each of us. And we too have an incarnation of letting God be born within us. And the way he does this and plays one against the other gives great insight. Now, they can't be taken literally, or you end up with some of the troubles he ended up at the end of his life. And he confessed the fact that if people understand it that way, well, that's not okay. And he certainly didn't want anyone to be a heretic. But if we can take and understand the presence of God within us at this deep level and try to experience that inner experience of a sense of God within, well, we could be moved quite powerfully. We too might experience the good things of our God with us.